Welcome to the weekly MindSweep, number 197, What's on My Mind? Self-Worth. Reclaiming the brain's definition of enough. Between confidence and doubt lies the space where worth lives, where we pause long enough to remember our value was always there. There's a single moment between confidence and doubt, and mine happened over a blinking cursor. Last week, I was writing a proposal for a local brand on a project perfectly aligned with my skills, my values, and my zone of genius. I know their industry, their audience, and the psychology of what helps people not just connect with a brand, but belong to it. Still, halfway through writing, my fingers hovered over the keyboard as my brain whispered its familiar line. What if it's not enough? What if someone else could do this better? What if my ideas aren't impressive enough? What if the proposal itself doesn't capture the depth of what I bring? It wasn't the first time the voice of self-doubt showed up, and it won't be the last. You know deeply that quiet echo that lingers after a launch doesn't land, a post goes unseen, or a client ghosts before signing. But this time, I didn't chase the question, and instead, I paused. I placed my hand over my heart for a simple grounding technique that I've learned from years of brain work and reminded myself my worth was here long before this proposal ever existed. That was the shift, the moment where the wiring met the work, the space between self-doubt and knowing where self-worth lives. Let's take a moment to reflect on our month of self-worth. When we began this month's conversation in week 194, I asked a simple question. What if your brain has been running a loop that confuses your value with your output? That's how this all started, with awareness. Awareness that somewhere along the way, our worth became tangled up with how much we produce, how quickly we respond, and how, on top of it, we appear to be. Our brains love proof and chase the dopamine hit of completion, the validation of being seen, and the relief of done. And for those of us with ADHD, that hit can feel like oxygen. But awareness is only the beginning. It's the light switch that lets you see the wiring and not the rewiring itself. So in week 195, I shared my confession. Used to think that I loved productivity, but realized what I really love was proof. Proof that I was doing enough. Proof that I wasn't lazy. Proof that I was still keeping up with everyone else who seemed to be doing it all. My to-do list wasn't a tool, it was a scoreboard. Every check mark was a little permission slip to rest, to breathe, to exist without guilt. And that hit of relief, that's our favorite brain chemical, dopamine, the brain's way of saying, yes, you did a thing, gold star for you. But when the check marks stopped coming and when the list grew longer than the day, that same circuitry flipped. My brain reads the absence of proof as danger. The brain's error detectors fired up, signaling that something was wrong, and before I knew it, the story loop began again. I'm behind. I'm failing. I'm not enough. That's when I realized that it wasn't productivity I was addicted to. It was permission. And last week, in week 196, we peeled back the layers and talked about awareness as the spark, but not the solution. Because once you see how your self-worth and productivity are entangled, the next step is to give your brain a new script. Neuroscience teaches us that every thought we repeat strengthens a neural pathway. The brain doesn't care if it's true, only if it's familiar. So when we constantly rehearse the story that worth equals output, that loop gets reinforced. Rewiring, re Rewiring it requires gentleness and practice. That week, I asked you to imagine what it would feel like to interrupt that loop, to teach your brain a different pattern, one that says, my worth doesn't live in the check marks. And what I heard back from you was an overwhelming message that said, that gave me chills. I'm going to try not to cry. That spoke to my heart on every level. I'm becoming more aware of what I want and how I want to see the world. It told me this isn't just about work. This is about identity and how deeply our worth has been shaped by systems that reward proof over presence. Which brings us to today and what's been living on my mind. I've been writing the weekly MindSweep for 197 weeks. We've covered 47 topics and I've shared hundreds of stories. But somehow this one, self-worth, has gone deeper than the rest. It's a topic that has entrepreneurs rolling out of bed to unpack what it means. The one that tugs on a thread so deep it aches. The one that's pulled something buried beneath all of our busyness. Shame. Most of the voices that reply to these emails that show up week after week for curated conversations belong to women like me, creative trailblazers who spent years doing everything right. We studied, we climbed, we checked the boxes, and then somewhere between the promotions and the proof, we heard the quiet truth rise. This isn't it. So we left. We walked away from predictable paychecks and well-worn paths. We built something of our own that is heart-centered and purpose-driven. We traded certainty for meaning. And still, every morning, we show up trying in our own small ways to make the world gentler, wiser, and more human, one Monday at a time. We acknowledge the challenges we face and we support each other in this journey of self-discovery and self-worth. We're building our life's work in a world that still measures worth in currency, productivity, and proof. A world that doesn't yet know how to price creativity, empathy, or care with the same green paper that props up the patriarchy. And yet, still, we rise. We rise for the student who doesn't fit the system, for the parent learning how to breathe through a diagnosis, for the anxious teen stepping into the unknown, for the artist who aches to create without apology, for the women to unlearn the shame braided into their stories about food, money, love, and life. We rise because we see them, because they are us. If there's one truth this month has carved into me, it's this. Self-worth isn't earned through outcomes. It's remembered in the quiet knowing that what we give, what we hold, and what we create matters. Your brain might not fully believe it yet, and that's okay. Awareness is the first spark. The belief is the slow burn that follows. And belief grows through repetition, through living the story you want to write next. Every time you rest without proof, every time you say no because your energy matters, every time you celebrate a small, invisible act of impact, you're teaching your brain that worth doesn't need a witness. That's the rewiring. That's the new loop. We are the ones teaching the world a new economy, one built on care, creativity, and connection. It may never trend on LinkedIn. It may never fit neatly on a balance sheet, but it is changing everything. And it starts right here, and it starts with you. When I think back to that proposal where my brain whispered, "What if this is not enough?" I can see it differently. That hesitation wasn't fear. It was an invitation to meet myself without proof, to write from knowing instead of needing. Maybe that's where you are too, standing before something that matters, feeling both the pull of your purpose and the tremor of your doubt. That isn't weakness, it's truth, because self-worth is what allows us to hold both. It's what lets us turn toward the tender parts that question, hesitate, or hide, and still keep showing up anyway. Because beneath the striving, beneath the silence, beneath the second guessing, lives something we're about to face together next month. Shame. Not as a verdict, but as a voice that's been trying, in its own misguided way, to protect us from the pain and keep us safe. If we can meet that voice from a steady ground of our own worth with compassion instead of judgment, we'll find our way back to the quiet truth we've been circling all month. We were already enough. 2 questions for you this week. In your own creative business, what would change if you believed you were already enough right now, before another client project or post? When your brain starts humming the old song of not enough, what truth can your heart sing back to remind you who you already really are? If this conversation stirred that quiet ache between confidence and doubt, it might be time to see your work, your worth, and your energy through a new lens. And that's where I come in. Together, we can turn chaos into coherence and confusion into clarity. I can help you spot distractions, refine your focus, and move from doing to being, and from force to flow. We'll translate your energy into language that reflects who you are and why your work matters. We'll uncover the essence beneath the noise so your message, mindset, and momentum finally align. Because when your energy is seen clearly, everything else realigns too. If you're ready to reconnect with the worth that's been there all along, let's start with a MindSweep mapping session. It's where insight becomes strategy and strategy becomes ease. Your brain, your business mapped. If you're interested in learning about the MindSweep mapping session, you can book a free session on my website. And if you already know where you need to work on your business, you can book a free consultation to learn how I can support you and your business, all at chickbookcreative.com.